Hey everybody, welcome back to another live episode of the Chronicles of a Gooner podcast with me, your host, Harry Symeou. Sick of the non-news, should we call it that? Sick of all the transfer links, most of which feel as though they've got zero substance whatsoever. I am too. That's why on today's episode, we're going to do something a little bit different. We're going to ignore the news for now. Anyway, we might be back later with some breaking news. If there is any, who knows? But for now, we're going to ignore the news. And what we're going to do is we're going to try and figure out exactly what Arsenal's priorities are this summer. Now, you might be saying to yourself, I already know what Arsenal's priorities are this summer. What's the point in this exercise? What's the point in doing it? Well, I actually think that the priorities might have just slightly changed. And I think it's worth doing a little bit of an audit on the squad to gain an understanding of where we're well stocked, where we're lacking, and so that we can figure out where exactly Arsenal need to strengthen and how many players we are short by as well. I think that's really, really important. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to get the spreadsheet out. Yes, I've gone all spreadsheet guy on you. I'm sorry. Not normally a spreadsheet guy. It's funny, right? Because when I worked in banking and I was required to put together these really complex formulaic spreadsheets, I'd struggle. Ask me to put a spreadsheet together about Arsenal and I can do it just like that. Typical, isn't it? You're listening to the Chronicles of a Gooner podcast with me, Harry Symeou, on this Saturday morning. Let's dive into it. Good morning to everybody joining us live in the chat as well. Good to see so many of you with us. It's always a pleasure to have your company at 10 a.m. on I was going to say a weekday morning, but it's a Saturday today. So yeah, that's gone out the window. Lots of you with us. Good to see. If you haven't done so already, leave a like on the video, subscribe to the channel if you're new, and all the rest of it. Really, really do appreciate that stuff. But yeah, let's get. Hold on a minute before we dive into the chat. Clark says it's not hard to formulate a spreadsheet. It is if you're me. It is if you're me. I was terrible at them when it was a part of my job. I'd often have to go to colleagues and ask them to put all the formulas in for me to make it all compute. And God help me if I pressed something and deleted a formula. Yeah, I wasn't very good at it. And I'm trying now, not that I've included numbers here, but what I'm trying to do is just make it look all nice and pretty. So we're going to use the one that I spent a bit of time this morning doing. And yeah, let's get into it. Leslie says, good morning, joining you from poolside. Oh, how I wish I was poolside in the sun somewhere right now. Wandering Minstrel's off to see Santana today. Enjoy, my friend. He says, perfect start to the day with a pod. Enjoy it. Enjoy it and have a great time. We got greetings from Kenya. We've got greetings from all over, which is obviously great to see. Right. Anyway, should we dive into it? Because otherwise, I'm never going to show you this spreadsheet, am I? Let's do it now. Let's talk Arsenal squad. We're doing a little bit of an audit today. Let's see what we've got and maybe perhaps more crucially, what we don't have. Okay, so I sat down this morning and I thought a good place to start would be to kind of try and list down the players that we have in each of the four key areas, right? So goalkeepers, we've got David Raya at the club. I've put Kepa Arrizabalaga in there with an asterisk next to his name because I'm pretty confident that Arsenal are going to sign him. Tommy Setford is at Arsenal as well at the moment. At the time of recording, things can change here. Carl Hein I've included as well, but I've highlighted him in yellow for the purpose of this exercise because I'm not sure if Carl Hein is still going to be here come the start of the new season. I'm not sure what the plan is with him. Will he be going out on loan again? Will he be making a permanent move? Because obviously he went over to Spain last season and played first team football. And I'd imagine that having got a bit of a taste of that, he probably doesn't want to come back to Arsenal and be a third or fourth choice goalkeeper, right? So I think there's a good chance that we lose Carl Hein between now and the end of the window. Moving into the defenders, the players I've listed, Ben White, Jurien Timber, Takahiro Tomiyasu, William Saliba, Gabriel, Jakub Kivior, Ricardo Calafiori, Miles Lewis-Skelly, and Alexander Zinchenko. Now, I've highlighted two players in the defense. The first one is Takahiro Tomiyasu because you just don't know when he's going to be fit again. And so the idea of including him, A, is one that I was a little bit uncomfortable with. And B, you know, you can put him in the numbers and you can put him in your kind of inventory of players, if you like. But how likely is it that he's going to play significant minutes? And when is he due back? Nobody has a clue. So I think that when you put Takahiro Tomiyasu in, you got to put that in with a caveat. So I've highlighted him, and I've highlighted Alex Zinchenko as well, because look, I think we can all agree that naturally he's not the best defender, but he is a left back option for Arsenal. But again, he's the player that's subject of some interest from Italy, from Milan in particular. We know that his wages are a potential stumbling point, but will he sort of concede on that in order to get a move and go and play some football? Look, I don't deny that when Alexander Zinchenko came in, he had a huge impact. I think if you're being fair in your analysis of the player, you have to acknowledge the impact that him and Gabby Jesus, when they first arrived, had on Arsenal Football Club. It was massive. It was huge. But we've evolved, we've moved on, and we've developed essentially past him. And we now need someone who can give us, that competence in possession, which Miles Lewis-Skelly certainly can, Ricardo Calafiori certainly can. But we need someone who's a little bit more defensively sound as well. In fact, a lot more defensively sound, if we're being completely honest, cards on the table here. And so Alexander Zinchenko, how long is he going to be an Arsenal player for? I don't know. I've included him in the numbers for now, but I've put the yellow because I'm not sure that he's going to be here either come the end of the window. Moving into the midfield, and this was a really, really interesting part of this exercise for me this morning, because when I started listing the midfielders that we have at Arsenal Football Club, I started to worry, because we can't even right now at the time of recording. And look, let me run you through the list, and then I'll explain the point I was going to make. Declan Rice, Martin Zubimendi, who is pretty much in, Martin Odegaard, Mikel Merino, Ethan Nwaneri, and I've put Thomas Partey on the list, but I've highlighted him in orange because, again, at the time of recording, there is no sign of a breakthrough in those contract talks between Arsenal and Thomas Partey. So there's a very, very good chance that Thomas Partey leaves. There's a very good chance that he leaves. Now, if Thomas Partey leaves, we would be left with 5 first-team midfielders. Declan Rice, Martin Zubimendi, Martin Odegaard, Mikel Merino, and Ethan Nwaneri. And I know what people are going to say. People are going to throw Max Stallman's name into there. I'm not ready to do that at this stage because, first of all, he's not made an appearance or been involved in the first team yet. Secondly, why on earth would I want to put that kind of pressure on a player that young? I don't want to include him in the numbers because I don't think that's fair on him. It's not that I don't respect his talent. I think he's an incredible talent. I've had the pleasure of watching him on a few occasions, and I've been blown away by how good he is. But I don't think it's fair to stick him in there and place any real responsibility on that young man's shoulders. I think if he comes in and he can supplement what we already have, and he comes in and he can impact and he can give us a little bit extra, then great. But it's a bonus. Shouldn't be someone that we build around at this stage in his career. So again, Thomas Partey's included on my list, but he's highlighted because as far as I understand it, although there's been no breakthrough yet, Thomas Partey's still open to staying at Arsenal. And Arsenal are still open to keeping him if an agreement can be reached. So it's not completely done and dusted, Thomas Partey leaving. That's not definite yet. That's not definitive. But there's a good chance he will, because if we haven't made that breakthrough up until now, given that these negotiations have been going on since the end of the season, and, when you're told that the player really wants to stay and the player is really keen on staying, and then there is no breakthrough, you start to wonder, don't you, if actually that is the case. So we're going to have to wait and see. But look, take Thomas Partey out of the equation for now, because the most likely outcome at the time of recording is that he leaves. We've only got 5 midfield players, which means we can't even field 2 separate midfields. Now, some people will say, oh, that's not a problem. Some people will say the makeup of that midfield means it's okay. I mean, I've sort of tried to map out what the team might look like in the next bit, and we'll come on to that in a minute. But you can't do 3 for 3. You can't swap 3 for 3. Now, I'm not saying that you're always going to want to do that. I think there'll be times where you'll swap 2 of the 3 or 1 of the 3 in order to keep that balance and to try and keep that continuity in there. I agree with all of that. But you should be able to, in terms of depth, field a 3 and a 3. And we can't do that with the 5 midfield players, 5 senior midfield players. And I'm saying senior about Ethan Nwaneri, who's still a kid as well. So we're short there. No question about that in my mind. You would have had Jorginho in this list, and you would have had Thomas Partey in this list. Prior, all right, you wouldn't have had Martin Zubimendi, but it's 2 for 1. You know, Fabio Vieira has been mentioned in the chat. Is he going to come back? Don't know. Don't know. And even if he does, is he the answer to our problems? Is he good enough? All questions that remain unanswered for me. And again, look, we talk about, you know, the profile of each player, and we'll come on to this in a minute. But if Fabio Vieira did come back, well, he can't play as a 6. And if he plays as an 8, you're really, really lightweight, aren't you? So I've kind of given up on Fabio Vieira. I've given up on Albert Sambi Lokonga. I don't see those guys as viable options for Arsenal moving forward. I think they'll both leave the club this summer. I really do. I really, really do. Moving on to forwards, you've got Bukayo Saka, Gabriel Jesus, who I've highlighted again just because, a bit like Takehiro Tomiyasu, we don't know when he's going to be fit. We don't know when he's going to be available. I think Gabby Jesus is a really, really good asset to the side. I do. But I've got to the point now where I'm looking at him and I'm thinking, are you ever going to be the player that you were in the past? And we saw flashes of that when he came into the side last season, and he got something like 5 goals in a handful of games. He had a really, really good short run, and then boom, injury again. And I just worry whether Gabriel Jesus is ever going to be able to kind of regain that sharpness, which is a massive part of why he's an effective attacking player, by the way. If you take that away from him, it's not like, do you remember, like, think about it this way, right? There's certain players, like take Alan Shearer, for example, Harry Kane, if you like. These were forwards, right, that you knew as they got older and older, okay, they'd lose half a yard, but you knew that they'd still be very, very effective because their game wasn't based necessarily on pace or sharpness. It was based on a sort of ability to read how the game was going to go, to identify the positions that they should be in, to identify those positions and those gaps and those spaces earlier than pretty much everybody else around them, and then to get into those areas and do damage. Gabby Jesus is not that poacher striker. Never has been, never will be. He is someone who, for me, is a really, really good facilitator. But in order to be that facilitator, he needs to be able to dribble effectively. He needs to be able to press. He needs to be able to use his body to spin left and right and twist people inside out, which we know he's capable of when he's fit. But A, when is he going to be fit? And B, is he going to be the same player having suffered these serious injuries pretty much one after the other? There's a question mark there for me. We've included Gabriel Martinelli in the list, Leandro Trossard, and of course, Kai Havertz. Now, again, I've not included some of the players that are out on loan because I don't believe they have futures at Arsenal. And obviously, you know, there are players in that group. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 that I've highlighted that you don't know if they're going to be there. So if you break that down, now that I've added Thomas Partey to the list, that is a 24-man squad, which I would question, first of all. Is a 24-man squad enough to compete in the Premier League, the Champions League, the League Cup, the FA Cup? And given that we're going to be playing games every 3 days at certain points in the season, is a 24-man squad enough? Probably not, in my opinion, based on last season's lessons learned. Now, factor in that 5 of those players have got stars next to them. Karl Hein might not be there. Takehiro Tomiyasu, when he's going to be fit, is only God's knowledge. Nobody knows. Alex Zinchenko, will he still be there? Maybe not. Thomas Partey, maybe not. Gabby Jesus, when's he going to be fit? And if he is, will he ever be the same player? All of these are questions that are unanswered. So you've got 5 players of that 24 that, you know, are probably not going to be able to offer you what they need them to. And as is highlighted as well by SP in the chat, I wouldn't go as far as calling them irrelevant, but Karl Hein might not be there, and Tommy Setford isn't ready, in my opinion. to play for Arsenal's first team. So you've only really got 2 goalkeepers. So two of those spaces are being taken up by goalkeepers that are probably not good enough and not ready. So we are short, guys. We are short. What I tried to do after that was map out what the team would look like with a kind of depth chart, right? So you can see it, the green box just below the original list of players. Raya, number 1 goalkeeper. Kepa, understudy, no problem, assuming he comes in. At right back, Timber, because I think Timber earned the right, by the way, to be the right back moving forward with his performances last season. Ben White, understudy. William Saliba at right centre-back with either Timber or White as cover. Gabriel at left centre-back with Jakub Kivior as cover. Miles Lewis-Skelly at left-back with Calafiori as cover. Now, I didn't include Takahiro Tomiyasu in this or Alexander Zinchenko because, again, I've highlighted those 2 players as one being a potential outgoing and one over whose fitness we have no idea. But the defense is okay. It's okay, right? My thing is that I don't really like using players as cover for multiple positions when you're doing this kind of squad depth analysis, because I think that you're always 1 or 2 injuries away from having a problem in multiple areas. I know that if Saliba got injured, you could put Kivior at right centre-back, for example. Or you could use Calafiori. But I think at this level, if you want to compete on multiple fronts, I know it sounds simplistic. I know a lot of people are going to push back on this. I think you at least need 2 players per position. And what we're seeing here in the way that we're mapping this out is that, yeah, we can name a second player for pretty much every position on the pitch. But sometimes we're naming the same second player. And that versatility, which people would package up as a positive, and it is in a lot of ways, it can also be your downfall. Because if you lost, for example, Ben White, and so then Timber has to play right back, you've now not got cover for right back or cover for right centre back. Yeah, you can start pulling players from other parts of the pitch. So you could pull Kivior across, but then you don't have cover for left centre back. Unless you pull Calafiori across, but then you don't have cover for the left back. So do you see what I mean? I think you need to have a couple of players in each position. Now, you're not always going to get 2 players on the same level, by the way. That's just not realistic. Like, last season was a poor season for Martin Odegaard, right? But you're not going to have 2 Martin Odegaards. You're going to have one player who's maybe at a slightly lesser level and is content with accepting that role, maybe brings a slightly different skill set to it. But it's not easy to have 22 players all of the same level. In fact, I think that's near on impossible to achieve. But using the same players to cover multiple positions, I think, is a recipe for disaster. And I think we've seen that bite us in the arse over the course of the last couple of seasons. I don't want us to go down that road again. If I move into midfield, I've put Zubimendi at the 6. And again, I've not included Thomas Partey in this because of the situation that we've already described. At 6, the only cover we have if Partey leaves is Declan Rice. But Declan Rice is R8, covered by Merino. And on the other side, it would be Odegaard and I would say Ethan Nwaneri. Now, this is based on what I think we're going to have at the start of the 25-26 season. It's not necessarily what we're going to look like as a group and as a squad. Well, I hope it's not at the end of the window. So I'm just going by what we have right now. And where, for example, at centre forward, I've put Kai Havertz and I haven't put Gabby Jesus as the understudy. It's because I don't know when he's going to be fit. So going into this season, we literally have one centre forward, unless people want to put Merino there. But then you put Merino there, you take away the cover for the left 8. And if Rice goes to cover Zubimendi at 6, then Merino has to play left 8. Do you get what I'm saying? We're too thin on the ground. We're short of numbers. Mikel Arteta said that himself towards the back end of the season. But in order to achieve the numbers that we need, I believe, to compete, that's wrong. Not to compete, because we have been competing. To win, I think we need to, A, invest more money, and B, bring in a higher volume of players. It's really, really important that we do that. And to bring in that higher number of players, you're going to have to pay more money, transfer fees, salaries, etc., etc. Moving to the forward line now. We've literally got, while Gabby Jesus is sidelined, one centre forward. We need another one. On the left, we've got Martinelli and Trossard, fine. On the right, Saka and Nwaneri. But then Nwaneri is also required to be cover for Martin Odegaard as well. So we are short, guys. Whatever way you look at it, we are short. And people don't want to accept that. People don't want to acknowledge that. Jid says, Arteta said we were short because of injuries, Harry. You are misrepresenting him. No, he actually said in a press conference that I was in that we have one of the smallest squads in the league. Injuries aside, he said we have one of the smallest squads in the league. Therefore, when you get hit by injuries, it impacts us a lot. He said that. I'm not misrepresenting him. He definitely said that. Jid also says, what's wild, Harry, is you will say you can't have two players on the same level and then go on to say some second choice players are not good enough because they are not as good as the first team, as the first choices. I've not said that about any of the players on this episode. I think White is as good a cover at right back as you could possibly find. I think Timber or White are as good a cover as you could probably find for William Saliba. I think Jakub Kiwior has proven to people that he can be very, very good cover for Gabriel. Calafiori's good cover for Lewis Skelly. Rice is great cover for Zubimendi at 6. Marino's good cover for Rice at 8. Nwaneri's good cover for Odegaard at 8. The point I'm trying to make is that you are asking the fringe players to be cover for multiple positions. And I see the advantages of that. The advantages of that are that those players that are your fringe players will probably get more opportunities if they're required to cover multiple positions. As a result of that, will be sharper. As a result of that, will be ready for action when called upon. And so in theory, when they come into the side, their level should be higher rather than bringing people in out of the cold and saying, you go and play there now. You haven't played for 6 months, but we need you now, come in. So that's the advantage to it. But the disadvantage to that is if you lose a couple of players to injury, you can be short in 3-4 positions because you're relying on them to plug multiple holes rather than just the one. So that's where I worry a little bit about the group at the minute. I made some notes as well on this just to make sure that I didn't forget any of the key points that I want to make here. We'll do that right after this. I'll summarize, then I'll get loads of your thoughts and your questions from the live chat before revealing what I believe the priorities are and in which order. Short pause now. You're listening to the Chronicles of a Gooner. We'll be back in just a moment.
You're listening to the Chronicles of a Gooner. Like and subscribe.
That's right. You're listening to the Chronicles of a Gooner podcast with me, Harry Symeou. Like and subscribe. If you haven't left a like on the video yet, what on earth are you playing at? Like, it really, really does help. Subscribe as well. Help us on the road to our next milestone. If you're listening on audio, leave us a review. That really, really does help. And if you're not a patron and you want to become one, you could do so via the link in the description. We'll be bringing you another Patreon piece tomorrow. We've got a scouting video on Martin Zubimendi coming your way. Have I changed my mind on the player? Have I still got the same concerns that I had maybe 2-3 months ago? We'll get into all of that in a lot more detail on tomorrow's Patreon scouting video. But let's summarize the bigger picture here when it comes to the squad. I think it's important to note that these numbers obviously are inclusive of Kepa, Arrizabalaga and Martin Zubimendi. Neither signing has been officially announced at the time of recording, but we're pretty confident those are going to get over the line. I've mentioned Tomiyasu, but I can't include him in the squad for the start of the 25-26 season when I'm mapping out our depth because I have no idea when he's going to return to fitness. I think he's a top player. I think he's a brilliant defender, incredibly versatile. And I think you throw him into the mix there, and we've got as good a backline as you could ask for, not just in terms of the starting backline, but in terms of the depth available to us as well. It feels like we're one player short at the back. And I think Arsenal would be naive to rely on Takahiro Tomiyasu to be that guy given his recent fitness issues. The Thomas Partey talks are going to be key here because if Thomas Partey stays, I think the midfield looks a lot better than it is as well because Zubimendi and Partey share that 6 role, Rice and Marino share the left 8 role, and Odegaard and Nwaneri can be the the two right eights, and if you want to throw Max Dowman in there eventually, and if you want to bring back Fabio Vieira, like someone suggested in the chat, you can do that as well, and that just gives us an extra layer of depth. But I look at the defense, I think we're one player short. I look at the midfield, I think we're one player short with Thomas Partey leaving. And then you move into the forward positions. And I think it's clear that we need a centre forward. Nobody's going to shirk away from that. We've been talking about it for such a long time now. We've got to get one in. It's imperative that we do that because Havertz needs support. Havertz might even need to be replaced. I beg your pardon. I had to hit the button before I sneezed. Havertz might even be replaced, right? And he might become the understudy, and that's fine. But we need another centre forward in for sure, because again, a bit like some of the players we've already discussed, we don't know when Jesus is going to be back, and we don't know if he's going to be the same player. Can't bet on that. Cannot afford at this stage in our development to be betting on that. On the left, you got Martinelli and Trossard. I don't think either of them were up to the level required last season, if I'm being completely honest. But they're both good players, and we're not looking to move any of them on from what we understand. So there'll be at least a bit of depth there. But we do need another winger. And ideally, I think it will be a winger that can play on both sides. Someone that could, I think, provide more natural cover to Bukayo Saka on our right-hand side, but also could be an upgrade on Martinelli or Trossard, so that when Saka's fit and available, whoever this player is could go out on the left-hand side and compete with Martinelli and Trossard, and either give us a whole new level himself or push those two guys to keep improving and to keep delivering at a higher level. So I think we need a winger, and we need obviously a centre forward in that. Look, when the squad is this thin, was a point that I wanted to make as well. You can't be carrying injury-prone players, and there are a lot of injury-prone players in this group. If I just run through this list, go back to the original list at the top of the page, you'd say that Takahiro Tomiyasu's injury-prone, given he's barely kicked the ball for, couple of seasons now? You'd say that Ricardo Calafiori's injury-prone. That needs to change. In the midfield, I think we're okay with regards to injuries. But in the forward line, I think Gabriel Jesus is obviously the obvious one. So, yeah, there's a few players in there. And when your squad is this thin in terms of numbers, you can't afford to carry those players. Okay, so in terms of priorities, I think centre forward is massive, because if you just look at the way I've mapped out the squad in order to try and ascertain the depth or lack of, that's the position that I couldn't fill with another player. Because I don't want to see Mikel Merino playing at centre forward. Like as admirable as admirable a job as he did, I don't want him to be playing at centre forward. If Arsenal go into a season with Gabriel Jesus still unfit, and with Mikel Merino being the backup at centre forward, given that we've had however many windows now to bring in this ever so elusive centre forward, there is going to be a meltdown, and rightly so. People would be well within their rights to complain about that. So centre forward is number one. I would have told you a few weeks ago that a wide player was the second thing in my priority list. But I was under the impression at that point that Thomas Partey was going to stay. Now, he still might. But at this stage, the most likely outcome is that the Ghanaian leaves, in which case I think bringing in another midfielder supersedes the need to bring in that wide forward. That doesn't mean that we don't need a wide forward. It doesn't mean I'd be satisfied if we don't bring one in. These three positions that I'm talking about, centre forward, centre midfield, and wide forward, they are musts. We absolutely have to go out and strengthen in those three areas. If we bring in a defender as well, a fourth player, we're going to bring in a goalkeeper as well. So by my estimations, 4 was the minimum. Kepa's in almost. Zubimendi's in. Now we need to go and get, at the absolute minimum, a couple more players. But I think, for me, it's just, I think I've messed up my maths there. We need a centre forward. We need a midfielder in the event that Partey leaves. We need a wide forward. We needed a goalkeeper. And we've obviously brought in Zubimendi. So 5 is the number of players that, I think we need to bring in. And if we don't address those 3 positions, I'll be bitterly, bitterly disappointed. There's a lot of talk about us going out and getting another defender. And I'm okay with that because, as you can see, and when we talked about the depth there, I think we could do with one more, because I don't think Tomiyasu is a thing anymore as far as Arsenal are concerned, with all due respect to the player. But at the same time, if one of those positions has to be sacrificed, it's the defense for me. And you go out and get those other three players, first and foremost, that we so desperately need. Centre forward, midfielder, if Partey leaves, becomes my second priority, and a wide forward becomes third. But that doesn't mean I'll tolerate or accept us missing out or failing to address any of those positions, because they are all super, super important. And I really, really do believe that. Okay, should we get some of your questions and some of your thoughts from the live chat before we sign out? Don't forget, leave a like on the video if you haven't done so already. Subscribe to the channel as well if you're brand new. Very, very short pause. When we come back, your questions answered for the last 10 minutes or so of the show. Okay, let's take a dive into the chat box. What have we got here? Jid says, how many clubs how many clubs have squads as deep as you want us to have, with 2 players for literally every position? Spoiler, not even City do, even with Nunez and Bob. If this was the supposedly strategy for every team that needs to win, because we're pretending teams are now playing an extra 10 games a season from 5 seasons ago, why are teams not going that way? Liverpool, for example, and Chelsea needing to offload. Well, because you've highlighted an extreme in Chelsea who was stockpiling players ridiculously for a long, long time, and have now got to a point last year, you'd argue, where they need to offload. But, you know, what I'm talking about is aspirational. It's what we should be aiming for. And I know that we're not going to have 2 top quality players in every single position, but you need to have 2 players that can cover each position in the squad. And we don't have that. We don't have that. You know, I highlighted it to you earlier on. We've got 24 players that I would say are first teamers that we should be able to rely on next season. And 5 of those players, 5 of that 24, okay, means 5 of that 24, I beg your pardon, are players that could well be on their way or who are not fit to start the season. So then it goes down to 19. So we don't even have double the number of starting players in our squad. And some of those players are, if I include those numbers, people like Tommy Setford. I'm not sitting here saying that we need to have 22 world-class players, all of whom should be able to come in and out and play at this. I'm not naive enough to think that people that spend half the season on the sidelines are going to be able to hit the same levels as those that start week in, week out. I understand there's a balance that you need to find. I understand that rhythm is a big thing. I understand timing is really important. I understand you need a bit of luck as well with injuries. But, I mean, let's not pretend that this squad is deep enough. If Mikel Arteta is sitting in a press conference himself and saying, we've got one of the smallest squads in the league, which is what he said, why are we as fans pushing back on that? If the man who played a massive role in assembling that squad, who works with that squad, who knows them all on a really deep level, who understands the ins and outs, the good points and the bad points of every single one of those players, is sitting there telling you that his squad is short, why are you pushing back on that? I don't understand. I understand there's a limit with regards to how much realistically you can expect to strengthen it. And there's a limit with regards to what you can spend, and there's a limit with regards to wages. I understand that it's not a completely, straightforward and easy thing to resolve. But I don't get why you're pushing back on that. Jid says, you aren't answering my question. I asked how many clubs have larger squads. Yeah, but to talk about the size of the squad is one thing. What about the quality? What about the depth in that sense as well? So Liverpool, numbers-wise, I don't know what their squad looks like compared to ours, numbers-wise, okay? But what I do know is that last season, Liverpool had Mo Salah putting in incredible numbers, and obviously he was imperative to them achieving what they did and the success that they had. But they also had Cody Gakpo. They had Jota when fit, contributing massively. They had Luis Diaz contributing goals at a level that our forwards were just not contributing. So it's about numbers, but it's also about quality as well. If you've got more quality, then you can afford to have slightly lesser numbers. But in certain areas, we are missing the quality and the volume of players, and that's why we've fallen short. I honestly believe that. Rumble says a squad that's taken 6 years to assemble for the manager, surely it's his fault for it being short. Yes and no, because if you've got a limit with regards to what you can invest, you can't address every single area and every single position every time you feel there's a need. And then things happen in football that you can't necessarily account for, and that will throw plans out of the window. So, for example, I think Arsenal probably expected Thomas Partey maybe to stay on another year, and that's changing, which means the priorities change, which means that you then need to allocate funds that maybe would have been earmarked for something else into that position. I don't think when he signed Gabriel Jesus for 50 million quid or whatever it was, that he thought he was going to end up with 2 ACL injuries. Things happen that you can't always account for. Obviously, I think there is a responsibility on the manager to try and assemble the squad as best as he can, and on the sporting director too. But I think there are things that happen in football. Sometimes you need to renew earlier. Sometimes you need to regenerate earlier than you plan. These things can happen. Denise asks about Bruno, who played yesterday. Is it Denise, who was man of the match yesterday against Chelsea? A guy called Bruno. I think he's a player to watch. He says Arsenal should look at him. I'll be honest with you, I didn't watch it, mate. So I don't know. Nelson says, answer the question, bro. Is that at me about the question about who has a bigger squad? Well, Liverpool have a better squad than us. There you go. Maybe not defensively in terms of depth and numbers, but my God, in that forward line, they've got goals galore, and we don't have that. Mr. Bate Red says, what is your take on the Jurriën Timber interview about being played by Arteta with multiple injuries? I mean, I don't think Arteta had much choice, annoyingly, last season, but I will read that and come back to you on that. Well, maybe we'll touch on it on an upcoming episode. Russ Morgan says, the way we have or haven't done business in the last 2 windows, I'm surprised Arteta hasn't walked. I think Arteta's visibly been frustrated. Like, it's clear, the way he's talking, the way he's being quite open about a lack of depth, and the way he's been open about wanting a striker when we didn't get one. I don't absolve him of all responsibility, because I think as the manager, you do bear some responsibility for sure. But I do think that these were club decisions more than Mikel Arteta decisions, just based on the way he was talking. And what he will do is, I think, make those points in the press conferences to kind of defend and protect himself from the criticism, to send a message maybe to the supporters that it's not something that he necessarily agrees with or would have done had he been calling the shots. But he's also got to toe that line, right? How many people, and I always say this because I hate it when people, come at others, with like really ridiculous requests and expectations. How many people in this chat are employed? I'd imagine the majority of the people in the chat are employed by other people. Would you go out publicly and slag off your employer because you didn't agree with the decision? Or will you make those points behind the scenes, have a moan to your family and friends when you get off work and go home, but obviously be very careful about what you're seen to be saying? It's the same in football. And so Mikel Arteta has to toe that line, doesn't he? He has to toe that line. Vindaloo says, if you look at the last 5 transfer windows where players came in and players went out, has the squad improved in your opinion? I think there's certain deals that have seen us improve, but we've also lost players that we weren't able to sort of replace, or we ended up at times having players come in with the idea of them being one thing and they turned out to be something else. So, for example, when we lost Granit Xhaka, I wondered how we were going to improve in that left 8 area. We went and bought Kai Havertz. Kai Havertz came in and turned out to be a decent option at centre forward, but not really a great option at left 8. And so that weakened us in that particular position, but it strengthened us at centre forward because now we had Havertz and Jesus instead of just Jesus. So I think sometimes you go to strengthen in one area and you end up strengthening something else. And you could argue that that's bad planning. You could argue that that's bad talent identification. And I'd accept that point and accept that argument. I think in some areas we've improved and in some areas we haven't. Like Declan Rice coming in, improved us in multiple positions as a 6 and as an 8. But obviously he can't fill both of those roles at the same time, which circles back to the point I was making earlier on in the pod about needing to have more options in each of the different areas. Ganto says, does the need for Havertz to play dictate the choice of striker Arsenal sign? I.e., does it have to be one which doesn't block his path to the first 11? He doesn't have to play. This is a myth. Why do people keep peddling this? This narrative, which is a complete and utter load of nonsense, in my opinion, is actually fueling a Havertz debate that shouldn't be ongoing anymore. Kai Havertz is a very good squad player. Is he a top level centre forward? No, but he's a good centre forward. Is he a top attacking midfielder? No, but he's a good attacking midfielder. Therefore, this is a guy who's a very useful squad player. He's got very unique physical features. He's got lots and lots of things that he brings to the table. So I love having him as a part of the squad. But this idea that because of what we paid for him, he has to play is a complete and utter nonsense, man. Do people forget that they're talking about the manager that literally went to the club and said, rip up Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang's contract, the contract that a few months ago I was desperate for him to sign, the 350K a week contract. He doesn't care about how much you cost. He doesn't care about how much is invested in you. If you ain't doing the business, you ain't playing. The reason Kai Havertz has been playing is because he's been doing the business at centre forward for Arsenal. Okay, maybe not to the standard that people would like to see, but relative to what we had at the time, he was the best option. So, of course, he's going to play. Go and bring in a top striker and use Havertz in and out of the side. I don't think anybody's going to complain about that. I don't think Mikel Arteta's going to have any problem doing that or taking that decision if said centre forward comes in and scores goal after goal after goal. Havertz has been in the team on merit. Why do people find that so difficult to understand? Because some of you guys don't like him, because some of you guys wouldn't have signed him, because some of you guys think that we paid over the top. For what it's worth, I agreed that we paid a little bit over the top for Kai Havertz, for sure. But anybody who watches Arsenal objectively can see that Kai Havertz today is our best centre-forward option. That's why he's been playing. It's as simple as that. Bring in a top striker, and if the top striker is benched in place of Kai Havertz, and Kai Havertz isn't doing the business, then by all means we can have this conversation. But it's that want to kind of preemptively have a go at Kai Havertz that just creates this whole nonsense debate that is quite frankly based on a load of rubbish. I'm sorry, Ganto, but I completely disagree with the notion of that question. This idea that he has to play. He doesn't have to play. No one has to play. You play on merit. And Mikel Arteta's bombed out some really big, talented, quality players that were on ridiculous salaries and convinced the club to take mega hits on those players. I don't know why people still think he won't take tough decisions if required. Neil says, why don't Arsenal give more of a signing on bonus and offer less wages, which is a good strategy, so other players don't demand high wages? It's a good point. I don't know if they do that. I don't know if they can do that. I don't know how it works. But it certainly sounds like a viable workaround. So yeah, I like that. I like that a lot. Let me just pick out one or two more before we sign out. Jermaine says, Harry, do you think the players need to do better? I can remember many games we drew or lost because of poor finishing. Martinelli 1v1 versus Bournemouth first game, Saka versus Brighton in the first game. Yeah, I think you're right. I think that the responsibility does have to to be put on the players at times as well. And look, as a manager, ultimately you're responsible for the performances of the team. So the buck is often going to stop with you. But I do think in certain moments where, we've done all the right things in the build-up, and that's what comes from the coaching, right? Players being in the right places, right positions, right shapes. If we don't finish those actions off, that isn't necessarily on the manager. And listen, I am going to give Mikel Arteta another season, and let's see what happens and how we end up. And if we don't win anything again, I'm sure there will be question marks around him, and those question marks will be fair. But I do think it's just weird to me that, people are so, desperate to kind of point the finger at him around things that clearly aren't in his control. He wanted a striker. He didn't get one. Be angry about it. Fine. I was angry about it at the time. Still am, really, when I look back on it. But point your finger in the right direction, man. The guy literally sat in a press conference and said, I need a striker. We're short of a forward. Are you saying he's a liar? It's a big accusation to level at someone that you don't know. I don't know. Anyway, look, going to leave it there because I want to go out and enjoy the sunshine, to be honest with you, on this lovely Saturday here in London. I thought it'd be useful to kind of do that little squad audit thing at the beginning. If you like that type of content with the visuals, I know they're not the greatest visuals, but I'm not that guy. I'm trying my best. Then let me know. Give me a shout. Let me know in the comments what you thought of it. And we'll be back tomorrow, unless something major breaks, with another episode of the Chronicles of a Gooner podcast. Thank you all so much for your love and for your support. I really, really do appreciate it. For all your interactions in the chat, which make doing a one-man podcast possible. And I'll speak to you all very, very soon. Have a great day and enjoy your weekend. Up the Arsenal. Goodbye.